This is the Bluegrass Blues podcast. I'm Jesse.
And I'm Amy.
So, Amy, what are we going to talk about this week?
Well, we've been traveling a lot, Jesse, which we love to do. So we'll talk a little bit about what it's like to travel from Kentucky to other places, particularly Louisville. And we're going to talk a bit about the arts.
Oh, good. So, where did you travel to?
So I just spent about 10 days in Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina, near Wilmington. And I got there in a very crazy fashion. I would not recommend this to any of the listeners. I had a credit on Spirit Airlines because I inadvertently booked a trip for my daughter that I immediately needed to cancel and of course couldn't get my money back. So I had a credit for a year. So I used my credit, but of course, Spirit doesn't fly to Wilmington, North Carolina, which was my destination. The closest place was Myrtle Beach. So I had to fly from Louisville to Orlando, and I had about a 6-hour layover that was changed after I'd booked my reservation. The layover became longer. And then I had to fly to Myrtle Beach, and because now I was getting to Myrtle Beach so late, I rented a car and I actually booked a motel room in North Myrtle Beach and then drove to Wilmington, North Carolina the next day, where my friend picked me up at the airport and then drove me to Wrightsville Beach. And then I did it all in reverse. Again, not a great thing to do. Yeah, I had the credit, but with the additional, and Spirit, frankly, I'm not a fan. Spirit is not fun.
Yeah, I know.
Oh my God. I mean, they nickel and dime you for everything. Mm-hmm. And if you forgot or didn't realize you had to check your luggage, and you find that out at the gate, it's $100. Whereas if you do it online in advance, it's $75.
It's $100 for one bag?
$100 for one bag.
Okay, because I flew through American this time, and I had to check a bag, and it was $35.
$100 on Spirit.
But on the first bag, it cost nothing. What was the airfare?
Well, I had a credit.
Okay.
Right? So $100, so I spent $175 for my one bag both ways, and then I rented a car, which was about $100 each way for 2 hours to get to Wilmington, North Carolina from Myrtle Beach, and then I also booked a motel. So obviously really stupid travel situation for someone who travels a lot and is usually really savvy.
So if you had driven, would it have been faster?
Driving would have been, it's about 11 hours drive.
Okay.
Yeah. But I probably would have broken that up into 2 days and taken 2 days instead of the whole day traveling to the coast of North Carolina.
Yeah.
Oh, and also you get on the plane, and I'd never flown Spirit before, and the card is coming, the beverage card is coming down, but they pass you unless you have alerted the flight attendants that you want a beverage, and it's $5 for a Coke.
Yeah.
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 So, and then it goes up from there for snacks and, if you want a glass of wine.
Yeah. When I used to travel between here and San Francisco, I was taking Breeze, and Breeze always charged for any extras like soda or whatever, unless you went in as like the business class, but that's like hundreds of dollars more. So for hundreds of dollars more, you can get a free drink.
Yeah, like $400 more, I
right,
think.
Yeah, so it's not worth it.
Yeah. What about you? I think you had a much better experience traveling.
Well, not really, because the beginning of my travel, I was supposed to leave on I think it was a Wednesday night on American Airlines. But the problem with flying through American, and I think through a lot of airlines these days, is that the later you go in the day, the more likely it is that they're going to cancel your flight because everything gets backed up and there was bad weather that day that I was flying. So I was going to leave Wednesday night. Wednesday afternoon, I get this text message saying, your flight's been canceled. So I think, oh, okay, this is going to suck. and they said they were going to reschedule me. So I knew that I better do it myself very quickly because they're going to do something that I know I wouldn't have liked. So I immediately got onto the American site. I booked the first thing in the morning. It was like a 6 a.m. flight, which means I had to get up at 4 to get to the airport. And I like being at the airport like a couple of hours before the flight just to be there and not have to worry about anything. So I booked this 6 a.m. flight. It's a direct flight to DC, which is fine. And while I was booking the flight, American sent me a message saying they rebooked the flight, but they were going to have me go through Charlotte and then go to DC. So I knew, okay, I want a direct flight. I don't want to have to lay over. So I just did the direct flight and I canceled their booking. So the next morning I go to DC. But other than that, there were really no problems with traveling. I get into DC. There's this difference between how you get around in Louisville and how you get around in the real world. I shouldn't say that, but anyway.
Public transportation?
Yeah, transportation is just so much better everywhere else I've been, or every other big city I've been in. For example, I have to have a car to get from here to the airport. I can take the bus, and I've taken the bus in Louisville to get to the airport, but the bus to the airport is like one every hour, and that's just ridiculous. But so my wife drove me to the airport this time, and I get into DC, and I just walk to the subway, and it takes me a half hour to get to my place in DC. So that's pretty normal. Technically, I could ride a bicycle from my place in DC to the airport, just as I could ride a bicycle from here to Standiford Field, or Muhammad Ali Airport, as they now call it. But the difference there is that you can park your bicycle at the DC airport. There is no bicycle parking at Louisville Airport. So you have to take a car. And when I got to the airport, the last trip I came from San Francisco to Louisville, it was during a holiday, and the cars that were waiting to pick people up like extended way beyond. And my wife was going to pick me up from there, but I called her and said, "Don't come get me because I'm going to take the bus. It's right here, and by the time you get here and wait through all these lines, I would have been home for an hour." So we did that. But anyway, so I get to DC. I take public transport. I like to walk in DC. There's plenty to see along the way, and I met up with some friends there. A former coworker. We went to one of Ed Lee's restaurants in DC, and I don't know who knows who Ed Lee is, but he's like probably the most famous chef in Louisville. He owns 610 Magnolia, and he owns a bunch of other restaurants in town. He's been on these reality television shows, the cooking shows on the Food Network.
He's got a great foundation too.
Yeah, he's like sort of like almost like a Jose Andres. Does a lot of stuff, especially during the pandemic. He was doing things to help restaurant workers get through the lack of business that they were facing. So we go to Ed Lee's restaurant in Washington. They're redoing the menu, but it's a nice space. It's near the Portrait Gallery, which is, I think, the best museum in the country and probably one of my favorite museums in the world. And after lunch, we went to my friend and I went to the Portrait Gallery, and just, it's a lot of stuff to look at. Oh, and I should refer back to the Louisville connection here. The Brilliant Exiles exhibit at the Speed Museum is sponsored by the Smithsonian, and they are selling the materials that they sell here, like in the gift shop. They're also selling them in the gift shop in Washington, D.C. So, yeah, I think you went to see that.
I did. I loved it.
Yeah, it was
fantastic.
Great.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of things you can expect from the Portrait Gallery. They're always doing something really fascinating in terms of American history and thematic things involving American history. So that was my DC trip.
And free. Smithsonian's free.
Right. The Smithsonian is free. There's one there are museums in DC that aren't free, but
like the museum.
no, the museum doesn't exist anymore.
Oh, wow.
That closed. It just didn't gather that much interest.
Oh, interesting.
But that's been closed for, I think it's now Johns Hopkins campus or Johns Hopkins building. But the other museums in DC are free, and you can spend a lot of time in them, just going place to place, spending nothing at all. And if you don't want to go to the museums, you can go to the monuments, because you've got all the famous DC monuments. You need tickets for things like the Air Space Museum, because that's very popular. But there's also another aerospace museum in DC that people don't know about. It's about 2 hours, maybe an hour and a half north of downtown, near Dulles Airport. It's also the Smithsonian Museum, also free, just a bigger aerospace museum. And there are other things to do in DC. So I just spend my time walking around the city, and I enjoy walking, so that was worth doing. And then I went to New York because my son and his family were visiting New York. His wife had a conference to go to for accounting, so it was a chance for the family to meet the rest of my family. My family's in New York, and it's the first time they've seen my grandchildren. So there's I have a 5-year-old grandson and a 20-month-old grandson. So we get to introduce everybody to the family, and it was a good trip. It was lots of interesting things to do, lots of interesting places to see. And New York is, we talk about transportation. New York is probably the best transportation city in the country, because I was in New Jersey. We rented a car, and we never had to use the car in the days I was there. We would just get on, for one, we were in Jersey City, so you have light rail, and that gets you to the subway system, like the PATH train, which is a subway, or once you get from the PATH train, you go to New York and you get the subway system. And there are buses everywhere. So, there's so much more of an ability to get around a city, at any part of the city, at any time you want to, when you compare it to here, where the buses might run, the buses don't run, who knows. I keep thinking that there should be light rail here. It seems like the obvious places would be along Broadway and up and down 4th Street from downtown to Churchill Downs, which, it's a simple thing to do, but it costs a lot of money. People here don't like to deal with anything other than driving cars. Even the bike lanes in New York and Washington are better than the bike lanes here, because I'm sorry rambling here, but I was walking from my place in Old Louisville to Indiana. Sometimes I just walk to Indiana for the hell of it. And I noticed that if you go over the 2nd Street Bridge, there's a bike lane, but it's on the street. And, who's going to ride a bike over that bridge with all the cars coming? And the cars will run you off. They just do that. There's so many accidents there. So it's not worth doing.
The Big Four bridges, far better.
The Big Four, that has no cars.
Right.
Which makes it infinitely better. But for just someone walking, it's a farther walk for me to get to the Big Four than it is to get to 2nd Street Bridge. But just the thought that they actually put that image of the bicyclist in the lane on that bridge is ridiculous. And they do that all over these cities. If you go to New York, or you go to DC, they design it really nicely because you have the sidewalk, then you have a bike lane, then you have where the cars park, and then you have the main road. So the bikers are always safe. Other than like people walking in the bike lane, which people tend to do in New York and DC, but it's a lot safer than Louisville, where they just paint a bicyclist in the middle of the street. Doesn't matter where, there's no separation between cars and bicyclists. And people here, they will run a bicyclist off the street.
Yeah.
It's just very dangerous.
That is true.
So,
and having traveled a lot in Europe, as both of us have, I mean, the bicyclists are everywhere, not just in Amsterdam, but in so many wonderful European cities and villages. And it's really built for bicyclists and pedestrians.
I used to bicycle to work from when I lived in Brussels. That would be like a 3-4 mile bike ride
Right.
every day, and that was. But the city was designed with bicyclists
It's a
in mind.
priority.
And that's not a priority here.
No.
And they pretend it's a priority here because they'll put up a sign, a traffic sign saying, share the lane with bicyclists. It's like, oh, come on, give me a break. People aren't going to do that unless you make it difficult for the drivers to run a bicyclist over. And they make it easy for drivers to run over bicyclists here. So
It's true. And I forgot to say, when I was going on my haphazard trip using Spirit Airlines to Wrightsville Beach eventually, I did have to like stress out about, and it wasn't so stressful, but I had to get a lift. And we live in a neighborhood very close to the airport. It should be so easy to get to the airport. When I lived in Atlanta, I took MARTA, of course, New York City or DC. There are so many places that have buses and trains that go right to the airport, and they should.
and they also have the buses and trains that are scheduled, like the shuttle buses. You can be assured that in New York, for example, you'll be able to get a bus to Newark Airport probably every 20 minutes. It's just like clockwork, which is when I refer back to the 1 hour you have to wait for a bus in Louisville. That makes no sense.
Well, and Bourbon and Beyond is a really fun music festival here. Lots of great bands, and again, I live fairly close to the venue, and I looked up the TARC, the Transit Authority of River City bus, and I'm telling you, it was late if it showed up at all to take me from a very short distance from Old Louisville to Bourbon and Beyond. That is outrageous. And I know that the festival makes money on the parking, and it's at the fairgrounds. It's this sprawling parking lot. It's just so unnecessary. There should be bike paths to and from these festivals, and there should be buses everywhere.
One of the other things I notice about Louisville, if I'm comparing it to other cities, which is not a fair comparison, but we have an overwhelming number of parking lots in downtown, and that space could be better used for, buildings and housing, or even event spaces. Like where I live in Washington, they've decided, and actually the places I've lived or formerly lived in these other cities, they've decided to actually expand what the functions are for people, like things to make people come to that area. So when I moved to DC originally, there's the wharf. I'm like walking distance to maybe a block and a half from the river, and before, when I moved there about 10 to 11 years ago, there was nothing but a fish market at the end of the wharf. It was like a lot of boats because people had, what do they call those? Harbor?
Docks.
Yeah, the docks.
For the boat.
There were these houseboats there, and that was it until you got to the fish market. Now they've completely redone the waterfront, so there are multiple venues for music. Like I was walking along and I see that Patti Smith is going to be there in December. I saw Bob Dylan there a few years ago. And there are restaurants, all kinds of restaurants. Gordon Ramsay has a restaurant there. Just bars that you can go to, and they developed that, and now that's like the place where people go because they used to go to Georgetown. They've also developed the areas around the Navy Yard, which is to the west of me near the baseball stadium. They built a new soccer stadium. All this construction has gone on in D.C. In New York, I used to live in Staten Island, and we did a trip to Staten Island. You've been to my house in Staten Island.
Yes, I was actually the best person of
The
your wedding
right.
in your house.
Yeah, so my son did not realize that we got married. He thought we had gotten married in New Jersey, at our house in New Jersey, but we got married in Staten Island. So I took my son and his family to see the house in Staten Island, and that's changed amazingly because it's also a waterfront situation. The ferry terminal just used to be the ferry terminal, and that was it. Now they've put a mall there, like shops, restaurants, spas, things like that. Next door to it is a baseball stadium for a minor league baseball team, the Staten Island Yankees. And next door to that, they've built a train station for a subway system that goes into Staten Island. So another advantage of having a waterfront situation, taking advantage of the waterfront and using it to get people more involved in the city. Whereas we have a waterfront, and they built a highway over it.
Well, and I will say, as someone who grew up here, there were all these scrap yards along the river when I was a kid, and it was kind of embarrassing to drive into Louisville, actually, from over the bridge from Indiana, and it just was so ugly and so junky. And I will say that the waterfront park system that has been created, and there's a new park that has been created in the west, further west now, which is lovely. So there is green space, but there was a campaign called 8664 to basically get rid of I-64 there on the waterfront. And of course, that highway was built when highways were built along the river, right? I mean, that was what was done on the West Side Highway. The East River has a highway. So it's not that unusual. But again, if you had priorities, of course, we built those really expensive bridges not that long ago. The East End Bridge and New Bridge in, going downtown into Indiana. But this is a car-centric city. Let's just face it. Of course, there's no clean air testing anymore at the DMV. So a lot of cars, Ohio River Valley, the air isn't so great.
They don't test for cars emissions anymore?
Never.
I didn't know that.
Dan Syme, who some of us call Dan Slime, he got away, he was a state senator, and he decided that it was an infringement on our civil liberties to have to go and get our vehicle emissions tested.
So
it's all gone.
So he's against breathing.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess it's a nonpartisan issue, huh?
Right.
That we all just can't breathe. Yeah, and asthma rates are, as we know, are really high here. We've got rubber town. Anyway, I digress. Let's go back to fun stuff like travel and arts.
Well, I'll stick with your digression on the emissions, but in New York they've created this new thing called the it's like you pay extra to drive in the city. I forget what it's called, but when I was in New York this weekend, I noticed in downtown Manhattan there were tons of cars, and I thought, okay, I think it's like a congestion fee. I realized that the city is going to make a lot of money from that, but again, there is no reason for people to drive into the city because you have an elaborate subway system, an elaborate bus system. You have bicycles like the city bikes. We don't even have a good bike system here.
Right.
I tried to take advantage of it was called Lou Velo at one time, and I got the card. And the thing was that you couldn't go to one of the bike stands here and just get a bike with your credit card. You had to have the specific Lou Velo card that you had to get mailed to you. And I couldn't see how anyone could use the bike system here because they didn't make it easy to use.
Right.
Whereas in New York and in DC, well, you do take your credit card, stick it in, and you get a bike. You can ride it for as long as you want, as long as you like to change it every half hour. If you don't change it every half hour, the fees add up. But if you change the bike every half hour, it doesn't cost any more. And the thing too is that there are so many bike stands throughout these cities that it's easy to switch out bikes when you're done with it for the time period.
Miriam and I were recently in New Zealand and Australia, and we were really impressed with the state that the scooters and bikes were in, and all of them came with a matching helmet. So they had all these colorful bikes and helmets, and I was like, yeah, they care about like your head, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
it's dangerous to bike and scooter without helmets.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I wanted to say about scooters was, in Old Louisville, which is, it's a lovely neighborhood, but I have seen broken scooters like in my front yard.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really even have a front yard, but just on the sidewalk in front of me or in the alley behind me, just busted scooters, just left where they're not supposed to be left. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, it's just different.
Well, there's also, I think, just the individual hostility to these bikes and scooters, because I've seen people like intentionally smash a scooter just for the hell of it. And it's usually some kid who I think that thinks he's doing something like clever, but it's just, they don't take this alternate means of transportation seriously. And it's actually healthier for you than driving a car and just having to be dealing with emissions. One of the things I notice about this city in particular is that it's like whenever you see a car that has like this roaring engine, like they're trying to be fast and furious, it's also always some teenage kid driving these loud cars. And I just think, what's the matter with you? Doesn't this bother you? Why don't you get a muffler or something? And that there's like no enforcement of noise restrictions or anything in this city.
Right.
And again, go to Washington, go to New York, they'll get you for it, but they are already noisy cities, so it's the decibel level's kind of high anyway.
Right.
And
let's talk about museums. And
yeah.
so when I was at Wrightsville Beach in North Carolina, there was this lovely botanical garden called Airlie Gardens, and I am a member of Bernheim and do a lot of volunteering. I'm a volunteer naturalist there. Just love Bernheim. So when you're a Bernheim member, you have reciprocity to arboreta all over the country, maybe even the world, I don't know. Mm-hmm. So I went to this place called Airlie Gardens, and I took my friend who was hosting me there, and we got in for free. There was a 400-year-old live oak with Spanish moss on it. It was just tremendous, so beautiful. That's my favorite tree, by the way. But we spent nothing, and mm-hmm. So, the arts are so critical for so many reasons, but sometimes you think maybe the membership is too high, but like the Speed Museum, the Art Museum also has reciprocity all over the country with museums. You've done this mm-hmm. various times.
Yeah, I have a Speed Museum membership, and I've used it to go to the Fine Arts Museum in Denver. I've used it in San Francisco. There's the Disney Family Art Museum, which is a really nice museum that's not affiliated with Disney World, but it's like the Disney family has all of Walt's original drawings and things like that. There's also Gun and Comic Book Museum in San Francisco. I've used it in Chicago. And, I have a family membership to the Speed Museum, so you can also use the Speed Pass for other museums in this city. And it just seems like, I also have a zoo membership with the Louisville Zoo, and I've used that to get a discount to go to the Cincinnati Zoo.
Right.
And it's the thing too is that if you have a family, just figure out the cost of what it would take for you to take your kids to something, some museum or something. And the amount of money you spend in that one trip, if you add a couple more dollars, you can get a membership. And that membership will give you the access to all these other museums and events around the world, really, especially, well, and definitely throughout the United States. So, if you can't, we were talking about free museums in Washington, but there are free museums. If you spend money to go to one museum and just get the membership, then you can go to other free museums. We also got, when we were doing our museum trip this time, we went to the Liberty Science Center in New Jersey next to the Statue of Liberty. That has a reciprocity agreement with the Children's Museum here. Also, we went to the Manhattan Children's Museum of Manhattan. That has other agreements with other museums. So there are plenty of things to do if you're a traveler, and if you have family. Check out these accesses, that points that you have that you can take advantage of, because there are a lot of expenses you can cut just by being a member of museums locally.
Right. By the way, during our podcasts, you may or may not hear planes every few minutes. And a fun fact is that Louisville's Muhammad Ali International Airport is the 5th in the world and 3rd in North America for cargo operations because of the UPS World Port. So I just wanted to tell you, we listen to these UPS planes all day and all night here.
Right, and especially during the holidays around Christmas, they just never end. And I was in Phoenix a few months ago, and I was at dinner with a relative who invited a friend, and the friend was a pilot for UPS, and so I kept telling him, hey, you fly over my house every day that you were there. And he wouldn't know where we were, but we're right under the path. We are right on it. If you're living where I live, there are nothing but planes going on. And I'm sure that may be a reason people don't live in Old Louisville, because they don't want to deal with the air traffic. But there are things in Old Louisville that are better or more worth doing than being out in the suburbs.
Speaking of that, we have the largest intact neighborhood of Victorian homes and Victorian stained glass in the country in Old Louisville. So, and then there are all these walking tours, lots of tours into Old Louisville. It's really a beautiful neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Great art fair that, of course, you live right on where this amazing art show is.
Right, the art show takes place in October, the first weekend of October, and it's artists from all over the country come in, and they take up just blocks of Old Louisville. It's just completely cut off from like Central Park all the way to Hill Street, which is maybe 2 full city blocks, and then you go 4 blocks in the other direction. So you've got this 8-block square or even bigger with nothing but events and art. And again,
it's good art. It's juried art.
It's really, really well judged art show. And again, it's this issue with how do you get here, because the transportation isn't that great. If you live here, you have to move your car out of the area because the art show takes up everything. But getting here, there should be like some kind of shuttle service,
right?
And they don't do that either.
I remember my mother was sick in the hospital, and I didn't live in this neighborhood back then, but I remember parking, several blocks away, and I found this piece of art that would actually look really good in her hospital room, and it was super heavy. This is another great Amy story of doing something that maybe most people wouldn't do. But I had blocks and blocks and blocks to walk this very heavy sculptural art back to my car, and then to take it to the hospital. But yeah, a shuttle would be great, just something to make it more convenient for people.
Right,
It would be profitable.
They did run a shuttle for the Kentucky Derby. I remember seeing that, and it would go from downtown to Churchill Downs. But the thing about being in Louisville, though, is I do walk a lot here. And this morning I did a 6-mile walk in about 2 hours, 2.5 hours.
I saw that you stopped at Nord's Bakery and got gorgeous donuts.
But the thing is that in that walk I took this morning, I would compare that to being in New York, and the number of people I saw on my walk for that amount of hours for 6 miles, they would not have filled a subway car in New York when I was there, because it just, no one's out on the street here in the daytime, except for the people at Nord's, because there was a line formed there, but elsewhere there's just nothing. I walked down by the football stadium, the college football stadium, nothing there. I walked through the campus, college campus, very few people are there. I went by the museum we have here, the Speed Museum. Again, there was nothing going on there. And have you noticed that they've redone the landscaping?
Yeah, they're putting in a big sculpture garden.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
They were out of power, though. I went there. It was the last day for an exhibit a couple weeks ago, and the power was out that day. And they had a very chagrined person having to greet all of us that were coming to the Speed Museum to see the exhibit. The whole museum was closed that day.
Oh, wow, yeah.
But yeah,
was that part of the weather problems we were having?
I don't know that it was weather related. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyhow, it's a great museum, though.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
Join.
it is. Yeah, as Join often.
The cinema's awesome.
Right. Oh, they're supposed to do a Josephine Baker thing there this week, or was it last week?
Oh, I don't know. I was gone.
It was a free presentation of, I think it was called Madame Zuzu, which was Josephine Baker's nickname in France when she was dancing there in the 20s and 30s. And, the premise or the advertisement they made was that Josephine Baker had gone from the U.S. to Paris because she wasn't appreciated in America. This a black
And we're
woman.
racist as well.
Yeah, a black woman who's trying to be an entertainer in the United States. No response. She goes to Paris, and she's like the darling of French culture. So anyway, they were supposed to do a movie. I think it's her only movie, and it's in French. So subtitles. The other thing here is people don't like reading subtitles.
I love foreign films,
Yeah.
and I prefer to read the subtitles rather than having it dubbed in English.
Oh yeah,
I can't stand that.
That's really annoying because the mouth doesn't move the right way.
Exactly. Hey, I want to put a plug in. I got on the TV news, Wave TV3. Shout out to Dawn G. I just wrote to her and mentioned that we were doing this concert called A Stop on the Underground Railroad, Voces Novae, and she sent it to her news director, and they came out to a rehearsal, and I got interviewed. And those concerts are coming up next weekend, May 31st and June 1st at Second Baptist Church. And you can still, the tickets are selling really rapidly, but you can still get those tickets at Voces Novae's website, VOCESNOVAE Louisville. So come on out. That's going to be, it's African American spirituals. And it's just going to be glorious, and we're really highlighting our place on the Underground Railroad. And the church was a stop on the Underground Railroad, so a very historic place, and lifting up these songs during a dark time in this country where all things that refer to enslavement, oppression, of people of color, indigenous peoples, women, etc., is all being eradicated. Even I just read that, even Trump's the transcripts of his speeches and all kinds of stuff, they're not even keeping record of, like, at all.
What do you mean?
Like, they're supposed to be archived, everything that he all of his speeches, and they're not being archived.
But his
Because
speeches
it
are
doesn't
insane.
exist. Well, they are insane. That's probably why they're not keeping them. And then,
I remember looking at something, and I think we put this on the website, our website, but there was an announcement made in observation of some holiday, I think it was, where he was. It was for the Kentucky Derby. He did an announcement for the Kentucky Derby. It was like, this very well written, eloquent presentation of the Kentucky Derby and all it stood for. And I read it and I thought, Donald Trump didn't say this.
No way.
Because
was that before or after he became Pope?
That was after he became Pope.
Oh, okay.
But it was Derby week, and they put out this nice announcement, and you could tell he didn't have anything to do with it because, one,
it was well written.
It was well written. Mm-hmm. There were no words in capital letters. Mm-hmm. He did it in sentences with 4 exclamation points. Mm-hmm. And it was actually cogent. I mean, it made sense. Yeah. Like, there was no talk about, sharks or batteries or Hannibal Lecter. So maybe there's something to be said for him not having his words documented, because historians will look at his speeches hundreds of years from now and say, what the hell is this?
Right.
What is he talking about?
Right.
But I digress. But it comes down to also just we've been talking about the arts and the assault on the arts that's being done by this administration. I worry when I go to Washington that at some point they're going to figure out, why don't we charge admission to all these museums?
Right.
Because all these, as they would say, freeloaders are coming in and taking advantage of all this stuff we have.
Why not privatize it? Just completely privatize everything.
Well,
right?
That's what they're trying to do with everything. Mm-hmm. But, it's going into the museums, and there's just the thought that they want to take this all away from us. Mm-hmm. It's a national service. It's what our tax dollars are going for, but I guess they would rather have the tax dollars going to billionaires.
Well, I just read in this big, beautiful bill, which is anything but, that, low income and middle class people will be spending more every year. And then if you are a billionaire, essentially, you get a savings of like $370,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's totally absurd that we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, how back in the, I think it was the Eisenhower administration, the top earners in the country were paying like a 90% income tax rate. Now it's about, I don't think it's more than 35%. It's just not, it's a number that doesn't compare with what it was before. And the fact that they aren't paying taxes on their wealth anyway, because it's all about income, and if you have stock options, you're not paying taxes on that.
Or a company, and you just work it through
right.
the company.
Yeah, so there just this abuse of the financial system that's being done by a president who is only appealing to the very wealthy in the country, and a system that's sort of geared toward wealth expansion and wealth gathering at the expense of everyone else's health and safety.
Yeah. Well, in terms of just good deeds, support the arts, support your local artists.
Oh yeah, I wanted to say something about the local artists too. My niece is a fashion designer, and she has a studio in Jersey City, in New Jersey, which I went to see. And there were a lot of things to see in this studio space she was working in, because her studio is next to the studio of the woman who painted the Michelle Obama portrait, that famous portrait that went around and was at the Speed Museum.
Right.
She also is in a building where they have all these Warhol screen prints, just like down the hall from her. And there was there was a famous model named Peggy Moffat in the 60s and 70s. And for people my age, and I'm very old.
He just turned 70.
Yeah, I just turned 70. Well, I remember this image of this woman in a topless bathing suit. Her arms are covering the important bits. But that was Peggy Moffat, and they're selling her outfits or her whole wardrobe, just auctioning it off. But my niece got to look through this because she also does costuming for movies. And it's like there's just this wealth of things that could have been used, and she was going to tell the other costumer she works with about this auction taking place in Jersey City. But it was like looking at this wardrobe. It was like looking at the mods from London, that era of psychedelic activity, and just mini skirts and multicolored outfits, kind of an
Twiggy.
Yeah, Twiggy, Austin Powers, if you remember that movie.
Love
It's
it.
that look. So that was another thing we got to see while in New Jersey, in the New York, New Jersey area. And we got to meet an actor, Jonathan Majors, who was in the Loki series as Kang the Conqueror. And he was also in the the latest Rocky movie. It was Creed 3, I think. He was an actor in that. And he is also on this television series. I think it's called Lovecraft Country. It's like a horror series, sort of like American Horror Story, but he's in that too. And my niece knows him, like through his wife is Megan Good, another actress. And just this reconnection with family. I didn't know that the family was involved in all these things. It's really kind of impressive. My other niece was nominated for an Emmy. She didn't win it, but she was nominated for an Emmy doing the Serena Williams docuseries on ESPN. So I got to hang out with that member of the family too.
That's very cool.
And it's just, that's what I miss about being in New York. There are all these things that I didn't realize was happening that are like immediately connected to me. And I have to go back there every now and then just to see, the family's doing pretty well there.
Well, and Jesse, they're black people in New York City doing amazing things.
Right.
There wouldn't be nearly the opportunity for them here in Kentucky.
But there's not the opportunity for many people here in Kentucky either. For all the criticism people have of the big cities of New York and Washington, and they even criticize Louisville, but there is something to be said for the different political atmospheres you have in these places.
Yeah.
Like New York is liberal. I was walking through the city and there was a demonstration near Central Park on the east side. A couple of hundred people were like chanting and having a demonstration. And I looked over, and New Yorkers just treated like, oh, okay, it's another demonstration. What's the big whoop? The cops weren't going nuts and like macing people like they do here. If you look at the Courier Journal today, they're giving a story on the 5th anniversary of Breonna Taylor. Now,
Her murder.
Yes, her murder by Louisville police. And just going back into the political arena here, Trump has just taken the investigation off to the Louisville police altogether.
Right.
It's just giving them carte blanche to do whatever they want. So you look at the demonstrations in New York, it's demonstrations of people of color. There's a lot of noise. It's a huge city. It doesn't bother anybody. You do a demonstration in downtown Louisville, the police go nuts. They start pepper spraying everybody. They were accused, or they did attack journalists here, and
David McAtee was killed as
yeah,
part of this.
yeah, and it's just this difference in the police state mentality here than in other cities. Well, in cities like New York or Washington, which are always being criticized by the current administration for I don't know why they're criticizing them, because people are able to express their voices without being persecuted by police officers.
Well, and it's interesting, based on where you're born has a lot to do with your lifespan, right? So if you're born in a neighborhood in the West End, your lifespan is probably about 7 years shorter than your lifespan if you're born in the East End of Louisville. But if you're born in a red state versus a blue state, there's also a disparity. It's about 4 years shorter lifespan.
Right, because the red states didn't go in for Obamacare, which was the Affordable Care Act.
Kentucky did, though.
Kentucky did because it had a Democratic governor.
Right.
If it had a Republican governor, it would not have that, and people would be dying, or people are dying, and people are going to be dying with the results of this current administration's bill that's going to take away Medicaid, which mostly affects children, and people who are SNAP programs. They're for starvation of children, they're for the death of children, but they claim to be pro-life.
Yeah.
That's just absurd. And while we're on museums, I have to criticize one of the Kentucky museums here. That's the Ark, the Noah's Ark. And I read in the Courier Journal, last week or the week before, where police were being trained at the Ark. The police dogs were being trained at the Ark, because dogs are always preying, I guess. But the fact that we as taxpayers are paying for this evangelization of the police force by, right-wing Christians who really don't believe in Christ. But, it's this absurd use of money, and they see nothing wrong with doing that. But I sure hope there's no reciprocal thing you can do with the Ark Museum, because I wouldn't want to do it.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy. Well, I think maybe we should end soon.
Yeah, I guess we should. I can't think of anything else, but we are going to do this again in a couple of weeks. I'm sure that if anyone has any comments or anything involving travel, let us know, but be ready for the art show. That's the next big event here. We've already been through the Derby.
We've got some music festivals, Bourbon and Beyond, and
right.
Louder Than Life. I'm going to Abbey Road on the River this weekend. Well, that's
this weekend?
It's this weekend.
Oh,
I can get you a free ticket if you want to go.
I would like to go.
Okay.
That's where they do Beatles songs, right?
They do.
Yeah. Okay, that's something I didn't know. But today's Sunday.
It's Sunday and Monday. It's this weekend.
Oh, that's right. It's Memorial Day.
It's Memorial Day.
I forgot there is a holiday.
Yeah. There's flags all over your house.
I know, but I thought someone just decided to be patriotic this weekend. But anyway, so that's it for us.
Take care, everyone.
Take care. Bye. Our closing music is by John Chamberlain.